Our speaker today is, and I'll put this up when I'm done. Our speaker today is U.S. Representative Charles Boustany, a Republican from Lafayette, who has represented Louisiana's 3rd District since 2005. Boustany is a medical doctor, a cardiovascular surgeon with more than 30 years' experience before he ran for Congress in 2004. Today he will give us an update on Louisiana issues in Congress, as well as his candidacy for the U.S. Senate, replacing the seat, the seat that was occupied by David Bitter. So, and just a reminder, only members of the press club and members of the media can ask questions.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here, and while this is my first time appearing at the Baton Rouge Press Club, I'm very, very pleased to be here. I really look forward to your questions. But before, let me give you a little bit. Let me start by giving you a little bit about who I am. I have fond memories of growing up in our family home back in Lafayette, where my dad and I took an old lot and we planted a bunch of oak trees and subsequently built a house on that property. And those trees are still there today, and I was home over the weekend. It's a clear reminder of where my roots are right here in Louisiana. I'm also very fortunate to be the oldest of 10 children, where we all learned how to fight fair and how to settle our differences. My parents raised us to work hard and love what you do, and my dream, going all the way back to when I was in grade school, was to be a cardiovascular surgeon. So I studied hard and finished up at USL, now UL Lafayette, and the LSU Medical School in New Orleans, and then built my practice, my cardiovascular surgery practice, from the ground up in Louisiana. And I've never forgotten where I came from. I've always looked for ways to give back to the state that's given me so much opportunity. On a personal note, I remember one Friday afternoon getting called into the emergency room to see a patient. And this is a man who had just lost his business. His wife had divorced him. He'd lost his health insurance when he lost his business. And he had suffered a heart attack because of all the stress he was under. And he was told he needed open heart surgery. I sat down with him, and I could tell this guy was really anxious. I sat down with him. He was worried about his health. He was worried about how he was going to pay his bills. And I looked him in the eye, and I said, "Don't worry. I'm going to take care of you. I'm not going to charge you a penny, and I'm going to get you through this." Later that day, I went over to see the hospital CEO, and I told the CEO, "Listen, this is a nonprofit hospital. It should be doing charity work. And if anybody qualifies, it's certainly this young man who just lost his business and is really in dire straits." And I convinced the CEO that afternoon to waive the bill, and we took care of that young man. My life has been about helping others over the course of time in medicine and now in public service. As a doctor, I can tell you, when I was practicing medicine, I was very troubled by the mounting problems I saw in our healthcare system, with growing cost, and oftentimes the lack of quality and coordination in healthcare. I believed then what I do now. We need legislators with records of success in the private sector, but also representatives in government who can bring real-world experience to Washington. So when I had the opportunity to run for Congress, I wasn't widely known, and I can tell you, I wasn't expected to win either. But I worked hard, and I did win. And in Congress, I've never been afraid to take on tough fights, whether it's the president, the congressional Democrats, special interests, or my own party's leadership. Let me give you an example. Veterans Health. When I took office, I realized that our veterans were not getting good access to health care throughout the 3rd Congressional District. And they deserve better than what they were getting. Many of them in my district were forced to drive many hours away for basic care that they should have been getting right there in our communities. I had to fight my own party leadership, the president, and an incompetent VA bureaucracy to bring 2 new veterans health clinics to Louisiana. And now those clinics are under construction. And they're going to be completed by the end of this year. The point is, I'm not afraid to go to bat for Louisiana when the chips are down. And instead of just talking tough, I always roll my sleeves up, go to work, and get results. I think there's not enough of that kind of leadership in Washington today. You all know, I know, the American people are furious with the direction of this country. This country's headed in a bad direction. Our president's weak and listless leadership has created a world where our allies don't trust us, our enemies don't fear us. His attacks on important industries like oil and gas have slowed our economic recovery, and the American people have just lost confidence about the state of our economy. In 2016, Louisiana will elect a new United States Senator. Louisiana needs a senator who has a deep understanding of our nation's problems, how decisions in Riyadh affect unemployment and rain. Louisiana needs a senator who talks less and works more. And Louisiana needs a senator who has a proven track record of getting conservative results no matter the circumstances. I believe our next senator from Louisiana must demonstrate to the voters a proven track record, an understanding of the current challenges facing our nation, and offer conservative solutions to solve these problems. That's why I'm running for the United States Senate, because I know I will be that senator. Now, I believe this race is going to be about three issues, three broad categories: strengthening our national security, growing our economy, and safeguarding our American values. Let me tell you a little bit about my vision for our country and what I plan to do as our next United States Senator. First and foremost, we have to keep American families safe. It means supporting the most capable, well-equipped military and intelligence community with the necessary funding for overseas operations. It means developing an effective diplomatic strategy to build functioning coalitions that not only isolate rogue regimes and help us defeat terrorism, but also to create a more stable and prosperous world. And it means articulating a real foreign policy strategy instead of careening from crisis to crisis. Secondly, we must grow our economy to give families the opportunity to pursue the American dream. We must unshackle our businesses from overly burdensome regulations mandated by Obamacare, the EPA, and the IRS. We must allow American companies to compete by lowering taxes, opening new markets overseas, and promoting innovation. We must stop the assault on the energy sector with a strategy that empowers American energy production to help stabilize the global price of oil. And we must build a diverse workforce through improved technical and vocational training with the necessary skills to meet the challenges of the 21st century. And finally, we cannot lose sight of the deeply held values that made America the most exceptional nation on earth. It includes ensuring every unborn child has the right to live, to pursue the American principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It includes supporting the family as the most basic building block of our society and recognizing that strong families give our children better opportunities to succeed. And it includes giving a helping hand to those who have fallen on difficult times, promoting the value of hard work to climb the ladder of opportunity. In conclusion, I believe Louisiana can be a leader as our country confronts all of these challenges. Our central location on the Gulf of Mexico with the Mississippi River and a natural system of ports and waterways means we can be the epicenter of commerce. Our energy resources position us as a leader in the global economy. Our military communities, including the Joint Readiness Training Center at Fort Polk and the U.S. Air Force Global Strike Command at Barksdale, are of critical importance to our national security. I believe Louisiana has everything necessary to lead our country as we face these critical challenges. We need a U.S. Senator who will assure Louisiana plays that leading role. I refuse to peddle the politics of fear, obstruction, and division. Instead, I will lead the politics of high aspiration and achievement. I look forward to traveling our state from Abbeville to Zwolle to share my vision with the people of Louisiana. Thank you. And I'm happy to take your questions. Yes?
Mark Armstrong with WPRC.
Yeah. Well, stand up so everybody can hear you.
Sure.
Yeah, if you don't mind. And,
Congress, please repeat
Okay, I'll do that, yes, okay.
So our state's facing some bad economic times, especially with the downturn in oil. You had said that one of the things we need to do to stabilize gas prices is to back off regulations on oil companies. But as has been widely reported, it's the upsurge of oil production here in the United States that's really driven that price down. It doesn't seem to be that regulation has really caused the price to go down. It seems to be all the oil production that's going on, particularly here in Louisiana, is what's caused the price to go down. If we are facing a recession here in Louisiana, what can be done maybe on a national level, maybe the Senate or wider stroke of congressmen to keep that from happening? It's a very vague question, but your thoughts, please.
No, it's a very timely and important question. And for those of you in the back, the question pertains to the low price of oil, the factors that have driven down the price of oil, and the impact on Louisiana. And what should we do? Because this is having, in effect, a recessionary impact on Louisiana. I could get into what's causing this, but I'm gonna offer some solutions to start. And this is what I think we need to do. First, right off the bat, we need to take care of those who've lost their jobs. In Lafayette alone, 5,500 people last year lost their jobs, and we're facing more layoffs across the entire coast of our state. This is hitting us hard, not to mention the impact on the revenue. I believe the first thing we ought to do is look at solutions to help these people keep their job skills and stay in the workforce so that they don't lose their homes. We also know that these job losses are coming on the upstream side, the exploration production side, the supply companies, and the service companies. But on the downstream side, which is the refineries and manufacturing related to petrochemicals, we have huge openings, huge job openings now in Lake Charles, here in Baton Rouge, as we're seeing more investment coming into that part of the energy sector. I think we need policies here in the state that help those who've lost their jobs match up with these job openings so that they don't lose their skills, and then when production comes back up to normal levels, price stabilizes, we can get more equilibrium and have a stable workforce in this area. Because when it comes back, we don't want to lose that workforce such as what happened in the 80s. That's got to be the immediate local issue. Now, the broader issue of supply and demand is what's driving this. Slack global demand, China's demand is markedly down, Asian demand, European demand, those countries are in recession. So you have demand at the same time that we have a big uptick in the supply side because of the shale revolution. So we're going to have to restructure how we operate in that environment to position American energy production in the long run to take advantage of it. And I do believe we're in a winning position in the long run because we're not as dependent on that production as countries like Saudi Arabia that 80 to 90% of their government revenues come purely from oil. So bottom line is this. First and foremost in that regard, in dealing broadly beyond the workforce issue, I think we take the opportunity to build out more storage capacity because we are saturated. We're having to store oil in tankers now, which is much more expensive. We should build out better pipelines to create a more efficient market within the United States, but also coordinating with Canada and Mexico, and mount a broad diplomatic strategy to shift the center of balance away from state-run companies such as OPEC and Russia and the Iranian company to a more open market base. And I think we're going to have the economic clout to be able to do that. We need the policies put in place to make that happen, which means opening trade policy to get demand up, but also to change the rules of trade so that these state-owned companies operate within a rules-based system and not an arbitrary system where they can arbitrarily set prices. So those are some of the features I think that go into what we need to do. It's a lengthy answer, it's a complicated problem, but I do have a handle on the general approach to dealing with it. And those are the things that we need to do. Thank you. One last thing I should mention, we took one step, and I should have said this at the beginning. We took one important step at the end of last year. We got rid of a 40-year-old ban on crude exports. If we had not done that, we would be in no position to do any of the other things I mentioned. And the immediate impact was it eliminated a price spread between global prices and U.S. prices. If we hadn't done that, U.S. oil might be $18 to $20 a barrel right now instead of where it is. And so that was a critical step. I led that effort in Congress. Yes, sir.
What has Obamacare done right, and how would you change it or replace it?
Well, I'm not aware of anything Obamacare has done right in the healthcare arena, because healthcare costs are going up. It's disrupted coverage throughout the healthcare market for providers. It's causing massive consolidation, both on the provider side and on the insurance side, leading to fewer choices. It's taking the entire healthcare economy in the wrong direction. I can't find anything I like about it. I think we need a full replacement of this that deals in a cost-effective way and a more effective way to provide a doctor-patient relationship for those who have pre-existing conditions. I think we need policies that bring the cost down through competition, transparency, and better sharing of information. I believe we need clearly a major focus on quality initiatives. And the Obamacare approach is from the top down. It's very prescriptive, where everything comes from the Secretary of Health and Human Services. We need to unleash American innovation and let different models of delivery spring up, because what works in Boston, Massachusetts is going to be different than Baton Rouge or Crowley, Louisiana. We need to unleash that kind of innovation that provides the highest quality doctor-patient relationship with nothing to interfere in between. And then I do believe on the Medicare and Medicaid side, again, you need more transparency and market-based forces to drive the cost down, such as what we did with Medicare Part D, which has actually driven the cost down for our seniors and has led to higher satisfaction amongst our seniors. Those are some of the things I think that we need to do. Yes?
Our present governor said that expanding Medicaid was pretty much a difference between right and wrong. He painted it out to be that simple. From everything I've been informed with, Medicaid expansion will only work well if there's an increase in the provider reimbursement rates due to a shortage of physicians that treat Medicaid patients. Do you concur with that assessment? What do you think of the characterization of it being a simple right versus wrong? Do you agree that provider rates would have to go up to match the ensuing demand? And if that is the case, who picks up the tab for that? Is it going to be the federal government? Is it going to be the state government? Or?
Yeah, this is a very important and timely question, because Medicaid clearly is breaking the budget of not only Louisiana but other states as well. And the problem is this: a Medicaid patient in Louisiana and in just about any other state is hard-pressed to find a physician to take care of them. They end up in the emergency room. That's where their first encounter is with a physician, and that physician then has to take them on as a patient because of federal law. But the fact is, we need to shift the care to an earlier phase, more prevention, more early interventions. And you can't do that in the emergency room. It's too late. Otherwise, you flood our emergency rooms and make it difficult for the emergency room providers to treat really urgent situations. So unless you reform Medicaid in this state along certain lines, you're going to create a disaster if you expand Medicaid. It's going to be very expensive, and you're going to flood our emergency rooms. Now, the key there is to figure out how to get the Medicaid program to get a full complement of physicians that will treat these patients early, just as anybody who has health insurance. And that means you have to fix the mismatch between reimbursement and cost, because physician practices cannot withstand, they won't stay in practice for long if they solely provide Medicaid. They just can't, the math doesn't add up. Those kinds of reforms are going to be absolutely necessary. Otherwise, this is a recipe for disaster. So it gets back to establishing a high-quality doctor-patient relationship on the front end. And policies need to keep that principle in mind. Otherwise, any healthcare policy will fail unless you do that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Have you introduced any legislation to do any of this?
Well, I have introduced legislation dealing with the Medicare program. I'm not on the committee dealing with Medicaid per se, but I do have legislation that broadly deals with those quality issues. I'll give you another example. Here's something I introduced that I think has a very good shot at becoming law this year, because it has strong bipartisan support in both House and the Senate. Under Obamacare today, if you're a small business owner and you can't afford to provide insurance for your employees, let's say you want to give them some help and use pre-tax dollars to let them go buy insurance through the exchange, but help them cover the costs with those pre-tax dollars, you get fined $100 per day per employee because you're out of compliance with Obamacare. That is an example of an overly restrictive policy that's hurting a small business owner who's trying to be responsible to help their employees. I've got legislation that fixes that problem. And you know, a lot of these folks are people who do end up on Medicaid because they can't afford insurance. So we need policies at every single level helping to bring down that cost, making it easier for people to afford insurance, helping responsible employers who want to provide insurance, and not making it difficult for them. Yes, sir.
Do you believe that states like Louisiana, where health insurance companies are completely unregulated, will always have the problem you just described?
Well, I think, I'm trying to understand your question. You're talking about regulation?
Health insurance companies in this state are not regulated.
Well, they are subject to some regulation.
They're not subject to rate regulation. So they're able to raise rates at will.
I think they're limited to a 10% cap on that under federal law. Under federal law, insurance commissioners are limited to a 10% cap on rate increases unless they get some kind of special waiver beyond that. But I think the problem we have right now with Obamacare is this. What's happened with insurance is because of certain provisions, and I can get into the technical aspects of that, but I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to bore you with it. It's forcing consolidation. So a lot of the smaller insurance companies are getting out of the business because they're finding their cost structure not workable because of the restrictions in Obamacare. So they're consolidating, and we're going to end up with only a handful of very large insurance providers. We've already seen that in this state. It's happening countrywide. And the fact is you're going to have more monopolistic behavior, fewer choices for individuals and for families and for businesses. That's the wrong trend. You want a more transparent, open insurance market with a variety of products that allows a business or an individual or a head of a family to pick the best product for themselves, not an overly restrictive one. And if you go back to in President Obama's first year in office, when he gave a joint address to Congress, I was asked by the leaders of the House and Senate to give the official Republican response. And that's exactly what I addressed at the time. I said, well, while the president wants to take us in the wrong direction with an overly restrictive insurance market, we need a more transparent, open insurance market that competition and consumer empowerment drives this. That's the best way to solve the problem. That's why we want small businesses to be able to pull together to get greater purchasing power vis-a-vis an insurance company. Or perhaps even let state insurance commissioners form compacts, multi-state compacts, to create a larger regional market so that you have more choices. Then you can drive the cost down, provided you have proper transparency. Yeah.
How do you increase reimbursements to doctors when we're already so far in the hole there in Louisiana? How do you afford that?
Yeah, the question is how do you fix the reimbursement problem? And it starts with Medicare, because Medicare is the bellwether. And Medicare basically sets prices. It's price fixing. You can look at it. It's been that way going all the way back several decades now. So they set a price, and everybody else sets their price either at Medicare or just below Medicare prices, as they do in Medicaid. It's typically 30% lower. Or insurance companies are typically at Medicare or maybe 10% higher. Price fixed. But it's price fixed below cost. And that's the problem. We took the first step at the beginning of last year, and I was one of the leaders in writing this legislation, and a key co-author, where for the first time in decades, we fixed the entire framework for Medicare reimbursement. There used to be this thing called the Sustainable Growth Rate Formula, which set those prices. And what we've now done is create a whole new framework repealing that and allowing a 3-year grace period for physicians to come forward to help create a price structure and different types of pricing arrangements that would meet their specific specialties with specialty input. We think this is going to be revolutionary in actually matching cost and reimbursement. But it goes further than that. It matches cost and reimbursement based on quality. So if there's quality, there are incentives to get higher reimbursement. If there's not, then you end up either flat or with a slight penalty. And we think this helps to align the incentives more perfectly.
How do you avoid that, though?
Talking about.
No, that passed into law. We passed that into law. And it also had a couple of key Medicare provisions to help bend the cost of Medicare down. We'll probably save several $1 trillion, probably $3 trillion over the next decade with the changes to Medicare on this, without hurting quality. That's the key. I'm sorry, who else?
Where I started to ask was, are you talking about a rating system for physician specialties in order, because you said it's based on quality?
It's based on quality reporting where the specialties come forward with specific quality measures within their specialty. For instance, in mine, which is cardiothoracic surgery, we actually developed a very extensive database with quality reporting measures back in 1989, 1990. That's a model for how to do it. And we're challenging the other physician groups to do the same. But under this law, it empowers those groups to sit down and work these systems out with the Department of Health and Human Services and the Medicare program. Because once you put in place a more market-based reimbursement system for Medicare, the rest, Medicaid and the private sector will follow. Managed care will follow that, because they currently do so. Yes, sir.
I was wondering if you knew of any active approach to reforming Social Security that's down in Congress at all, and if so, what is it proposed?
Well, we took the first step to deal with the immediate crisis we're having with the Social Security disability system. We passed legislation which became law at the end of the year that will at least buy some time with the Social Security disability program and stop the potential of robbing the Social Security program for old age to try to fill that gap in the disability side. So we took that step. We're going to need to do a lot more to deal with the shortfall, the demographic problem we've got with Social Security in the long run. I think the most important thing we can do is get economic growth going, because right now, with unemployment and everything else, we have 3 workers for every beneficiary, and it's today's workers paying for today's retirees. That's the way the system's structured. So unless you get more growth and more people into the workforce paying in, we're going to continue to see this shortfall. So that's the key, I think that's the key element to trying to fix this in the long run. Yeah.
This disability was supposed to be for total disability, wasn't it? Is it possible that the program's too loose in standards?
Yeah, well, the question back there is, the program's designed for total disability. Is it possible that the standards were too loose? That's one of the things we fixed. We've tightened up the standards. We've cracked down on the administrative law judges who are just sort of approving everybody, and created more standards as well for the physicians who are brought into the system to do the assessments. So we put in a number of reforms to put this program on a much more solid basis. Now we have to see how this works, and if we have to make further adjustments, we will. But we also stopped robbing the old age and survivor benefit program to fill out the disability shortfall, which was an acute problem. Yeah.
One more question very quickly. I noticed your bullet points on immigration reform. Can you put that into some other words to tell us what you would like to see happen or what you anticipate happening?
Well, border security first. Absolutely have to have border security. And it's not as simple as just putting a wall up. I've traveled along the border in 3 of the states and seen where there are variations in the type of geography you're dealing with. Walls work in some areas, but they're not complete. You need a multi-layered system with more trained personnel on the border to deal with it, and you also need better surveillance equipment in general on the border. We have to get border security first, number one. Secondly, enforce the laws on the books. That's not being done to the fullest extent. And then thirdly, at the end of the day, we're going to have a vigorous discussion about what do you do with those who are here illegally. there's got to be some kind of way of registering them and bringing them out of the, out of the shadows so that we actually know who's here for how long. And I think with that population, you ultimately they have to pay whatever penalties and back taxes that are owed. And lastly on that, no amnesty, absolutely no amnesty. And if anybody wants citizenship, they have to go through the normal process that we have. Yeah.
What about enhancing a guest worker program that we currently have? You know that we rely on that quite a bit here in Louisiana.
Yeah. The guest worker program is oftentimes confused with immigration. It's separate. It's a temporary worker program for jobs that are not full-time all year long. Crawfish processors, for instance, other seafood processors, where you have a need in a very defined amount of time, and you can't fulfill those job positions with the local workforce. The laws are very explicit. You have to advertise for local labor and prove that you cannot get it. It's also subject to federal law with regard to wages and all the other things. And so it's a system that is designed to help promote American jobs. In fact, each worker promotes 4 American jobs based on statistics. And the fact is, we need a reasonable program that works. The program is currently capped, but there was something that allowed for returning workers, if they've worked at a particular establishment within the last 3 years, to come back over and above the cap to fulfill that specific need and then return. And that's the key point. They don't stay here. They have to return. It's a very regulated program. We, at the end of the year, reinstated that returning worker provision for 1 year. And I think we need to reinstate that long term until we get a better handle on our economy, because we've got a problem, and these are jobs that you cannot fill locally. So it's an important economic piece to help support American jobs. That's the bottom line on it. Yes?
I think one of the things the American public wonders about is, at least from the outside perspective, the seeming total dysfunction in Washington with a Congress who doesn't get along with the current occupant of the White House. We're going to change presidents at the end of this year. How do you see, getting the two branches to work together more? Because it seems like everything stalls because of the dysfunction. Yeah,
well, I think the key here is to elect a U.S. Senator who knows how to do this. And that's been my record. I'll give you examples. I mentioned the veterans clinics. I had to work against my leadership, the president, and the VA establishment to get this done. And in fact, had to get the House to waive the budget rule to make it happen, because these veterans were promised the clinics. And it wasn't just the 2 here in Louisiana. It was, I think it was 23 or 24 others around the country. But I led that effort, and I made it happen. With regard to dredging funds to keep our waterways open, I had to fight my own leadership on that. I built a coalition outside of Congress and within Congress that was bipartisan to make that happen. It became law, and now we're seeing a record level of funding going for the operations and maintenance of our ports, which is critical. That supports our oil and gas sector and 25% of the Louisiana economy, which is exports. If we can't move goods up and down these rivers, then we're dead in the water. In fact, on the Mississippi alone, every time you lose a foot of draft, it's $1 million per ship per day in lost economic activity. I got that changed. Recently, we passed a report on strengthening our customs laws. We had illegal shrimp and crawfish and other goods being dumped into the U.S. market by China and other countries. And our customs laws weren't strong enough. Our customs folks did not have the tools they needed. I spent several years, I had to work against my own leadership on this initially, then convinced them it was the right thing to do, to actually put together a bill that really strengthens our customs laws and virtually makes it very difficult for any foreign illegal goods through slave labor or anything else from coming into this market. That passed in the House. The Senate's going to pass that conference report because we had an agreement. They'll pass it this week. It's going to go to the president's desk and will become law. Now, the way I did this, I came up and I got my own leadership to accept what we were trying to do against their initial concerns. Then I crossed over to the Capitol and went to the Democratic chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, when the Democrats were in control, and hashed out the agreement with him, because he had a separate bill that had some good features, but was missing a lot of others. We worked out the differences in a matter of a couple of hours, and we came out of this united. We got a good bipartisan bill that's going to help American manufacturers and seafood processors and agriculture to stop this illegal activity. So I guess the point is, if we're going to stop Washington dysfunction, and it's rife, it's the biggest problem out there today. It's stopping good policy from being done. It's making people angry. It polls number one now, when you poll, over and above jobs and the economy for the first time. Well, the fact of the matter is, you need somebody who knows how to deal with that and who can get things done. And that's what I have a record of doing that, and that's what I want to take to the U.S. Senate. We've moved some things forward that have helped the 3rd Congressional District and the state, for that matter, based on what I've been able to accomplish in Congress. I want to take that statewide, because I want our state to lead in whatever national policy is being done. I don't want us to sit back and wait. Think about it. I mentioned the Mississippi River and all the great attributes. What other state in the Union can boast of a central location with the biggest river in the Northern Hemisphere that cuts right up into the heartland of this country and all the other rivers that connect to it? We are positioned to not only be in the top 10 in exports, we should be number 1. And exports and the energy sector, what drove us out of recession initially, now they're a drag on the economy because of policy. We failed to open new markets. We failed to promote this energy sector. And you mentioned the regulations. The regulations have hurt. That moratorium hurt us really badly. The latest rule they've come out with out of the White House now is this new rule on well control measures in the Gulf. It does not make sense. It does not meet best science, and it will shut the Gulf of Mexico down. Under the dire circumstances we're facing today, we still have some rigs operating out there. It will shut if that well control rule goes through. It makes no sense. So we've got what it takes. We need somebody who knows how to break through the clutter, break through the dysfunction, who knows how to legislate and make things happen. And that's why I'm running for the United States Senate. Yes?
Who do you like for the White House?
I'm going to support our nominee, but right now what I'm looking for in a candidate is who can lead, who can bring people together and help Congress work to solve these problems. When you don't have White House leadership, what happens is you see us break down into the chaotic dysfunction you're seeing today. Leadership in the White House will break through that. The 1986 tax overhaul rewrote the entire tax code under Ronald Reagan. It's because Ronald Reagan sat down with Tip O'Neill and Republican leaders in the House and Senate and said, I want tax reform. This is what I want. You guys work out the details. And by God, we got tax reform, which took us from stagflation in the 70s to unprecedented growth. We're in a similar situation today. We need a president who will step up, offer a clear vision of where he wants to take the country, pull those who want to work on the policy together, and help Congress do what it does best, and that is sit down and hammer out the details on tax policy, on economic policies, energy, agriculture, transportation. We've gotten a few things done where some of us have stood up and led on these issues to break through the clutter. But if you want to get big things done to really move this economy forward, it's going to take presidential leadership. Otherwise, it will fail. I've been working on tax reform now for 5 years. 5 years. And every time we get to a point where we seem to be getting some agreement in the Ways and Means Committee between Democrats and Republicans, we're talking to some of the senators, the whole thing falls apart because there's no White House leadership. Treasury comes in, they say, oh, we want to do tax reform, and we say, all right, well, give us your proposals. Well, we don't like yours, but they don't give us anything. I want a president who's conservative, who will come forward with real ideas, and will work with Congress on both chambers to try to get things done. Because families are hurting around this country right now. They're suffering. A lot of families are suffering. 46 million people in poverty. I spent last year chairing the Human Resources Subcommittee on Ways and Means. The task I was given by the chairman, Paul Ryan, at the time was, I want you to start rewriting our welfare reform bills. The 96 Reform Act was very successful. It helped move a lot of people off of welfare into work. But a lot of loopholes have crept in since, and Congress has not acted since 1996. It's just kind of passed and extended the program short term. Well, last year I wrote a complete overhaul of the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program. Completely. Rewrote it. 5-year reauthorization, strengthened the work program, strengthened the education requirements to make them force the states to work with community colleges to put people in real work, not work on paper, and then they still collect a paycheck from the TANF program. Close out those loopholes and give people the dignity of work. That bill's written. Now with the leadership change, I move over to the chair of the Tax Policy Committee, which I'm doing, and I'm working on tax policy, but I gave that bill to the chairman. I said, here, I did your work, man, run with it, take the credit. We can get these things done if we can get presidential leadership. The president wants to do welfare reform, but he won't work with us on this. I want the president to sit down and work with us and help us solve these problems. Yeah.
You can let him go. You can let him go.
Okay.
If Trump is the nominee, we support him.
I'm going to support the Republican nominee. It's better than the alternative, I can assure you.
Okay, I think we have time for just one more question.
Do you plan to have any kind of role whatsoever, even a tacit endorsement of who your successor may be?
Well, I think there are a number of really fine candidates putting their names forward. The field it hasn't really formalized yet, and I'm going to be focusing on the Senate race. I'm going to be working hard, traveling from Abbeville to Swally, as I mentioned, and every point in between. I want to reach as many voters as possible because I believe, as Tip O'Neill once said, all politics is local, it's personal, and I think people in Louisiana like that, and so that's my style of doing it. I like making lots of stops, shaking a lot of hands, looking people in the eye, and asking them for their votes. So I'll be focusing full time, aside from my official duties, which I will not neglect. I'll be focusing on meeting the voters across the state. Thank you.